O, diolch yn fawr unwaith eto, croeso i'r stafell werth. Welcome once again to the Green Room. Thank you for coming. What I'm going to say tonight is a little bit to do with the Welsh language. Now, my Welsh is like wool on barbed wire. There's evidence of a sheep, but the bloody sheep has gone over the mountain. He's escaped. But all this is part of what Dan Llewellyn Hall and myself have been trying to do with a project which is Dan's project called The Dunes. And it's been put together really, really quickly. Entirely Dan's idea. All the drawings are his, all the names or the drive is Dan's, and I've just submitted, or I've added some of the text. In 1984, Merthyr Mawr Estates put forward a proposal to turn an area of the dune land that they own and administer and still own, to turn it into a golf course. And that attracted the attention of various environmental bodies, including the recently formed Friend of the Earth Cymru, which by huge coincidence used to have its headquarters in this building, in this room. And my role in trying to oppose that proposal was to put together all the written evidence of the objectors to the golf course proposal into a text and submit it to a planning inquiry. Marvellously, the Green Cause won. The planning proposal for the golf course was turned down, and thus the marvellous, the second highest dune in Europe, in Western Europe, called Colgabrine, was not turned into the third tee for this particular golf course. But that just goes to prove, I think, that things can be turned down, but you never win a battle. There's always pressure. There's always pressure. While I was writing the poems for the dunes, I decided to think about the nomenclature, the names that you find in those sand dunes in Merthyr Mawr and Newton boroughs, because that is particularly fascinating. And the last time I was in those dunes was last week, the Monday of last week. I took a walk. The entrance to the dunes is down Puddle Lane, that people call a lane called Puddle Lane, but that's not really its name. Its proper name is Lorna Carrioron, Lovers Lane. And from Lôn Cariadon, you get into Caer Claprai, which is a really fascinating area. Caer Claprai means, I think, broken fields, ragged fields. And from Caer Claprai, you can go all the way up to the top of the highest dune, Cogabrine, which means the hillock of the crows. One of the great victories of that anti-golf course campaign was that the 50 acres around the Burrows Well, or Ffynnon Pwll as it's also known, those 50 acres were designated as an ancient monument, and that is a permanent designation, and that means that that area, those 50 acres, cannot be developed or changed in any way. And those 50 acres contain a really rich area of words, names. My favourite, well, there are two favourites. There's a very marshy area around Burrows Well, Ffynnon Burrows Well, Ffynnon Pwll. That marshy area is called Pwll y Tom Bryton. There's a dune there, a hump of sand, which is called Twmpath y Bryton Tom. The tump or the dune of Tom the Briton. And in my translations for certain of the work that appeared in the dunes, I call that part of the world Tom Britain's country, which is a really good Brexit word, if you know what I mean. and I did that especially for Dan, who is a big Brexiteer. I just did that for him. I think it was as important to campaign for the plants, such as birthwort, which is a very rare plant. In Welsh it's called abaldayar, and that the presence of that plant is also a reason for that area being an ancient monument and protected as an SSSI, a site of special scientific interest. I think it's as important to campaign for the history of the place, the Welsh language history of the place that you were brought up in, as it is for the archaeology of the place, the flora of the place, and the fauna of the place. And so for me, I used the dunes by Dan Llywelyn Hall as an excuse for me to use words that I'd never used in poetry before, such as Pwll y Bryton Tom, Twmpath y Bryton Tom, Caer Claprai. All these words should be street names in Dan y Graig, and they're not. There's Lime Tree Way, there's all these streets which are called out of trees, which don't grow in the dunes. But BCBC, or Old Borough Council, really missed the trick, and they neglected their heritage, or they neglected their own history by not calling the streets they were building after particular places which are now, still today, found in the dunes. And I'd like to think if they are going to they're going to continue building, at least one street should be called Tom Britain's Country Lane or something like that. Think about how the pub, the Ancient Britain in Newton, gets its name and where from. It's from there. Twmpath y Bryton Tom, Pwll y Bryton Tom. They're there for a reason, and the Ancient Britain is there for a reason as well. So, that fight for the golf course, that fight against the golf course was successful, but I don't think any area around here is safe anyway. Dr. Welling Hall asked me only about 6 months ago to be part of this project called The Dunes. It's a book, it's a beautiful looking book. I've only seen the finished version of it in the last hour, which he delivered himself. It's superbly made. It contains an introduction, certain poems which I will read from, and Dan will also speak about 16, I think there's about 16 particular images in there, Dan, which you've composed, which you've drawn. I'm going to hand over to Dan, and he will say a little bit about the images of the dunes, and I'll come back in and out and read particular poems from the dunes. I think we might need a light on a little bit more, I'm not sure. But it all depends if Dan wants it on.
Do you want it on?
No, I'm happy with it as is.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Right to the bed.
Okay, well, Dan, yeah, please say a few words about the dunes.
My first introduction to the dunes, the subject of the dunes in Merthyr Mawr was really through my father, late father, who trekked my brother and my sister through this space. It was very, at the time, very exotic space. Having grown up in Barry Island, we made our trip, sort of bi-weekly trip over to this space, the Merthyr Mawr. We trekked across this landscape. To me at the time seemed extremely strange, vast, quite threatening. We ventured into areas which would sort of seem to be sort of unnavigable. You couldn't quite work out your left from your right, and there were no landmarks. And, the fact is that everything there is covered in the sand, and you get the occasional tree, but it's mostly gorse and hedgerows and a bit of undulation. And this space over the past, I suppose, 20, 25 years has stuck in my head, and I've always thought about how to approach it visually. And I'd like to begin things really with a first-hand encounter. So my encounter was this memoryscape I had going through it. And then I came across Robert's work, and really the prompt in some ways were the words. And the words sort of had an authority about them and a sense of location, direct sense of feeling about being in that place. And Robert, having lived in this area for the length of time he has, and his engagement with it. And I thought there was a lot of similarity to the way in which I think about it, and the way in which you can stumble across these dunes and these spaces, and occasionally get these outcrop of rocks or strange situation of like the rifle range, or like these archaeological burrows and things like that, which you look at and you think that there's something not entirely natural about it. And I always remember my father saying that there was this huge village beneath our feet when we were trampling across these big sands. Of course there is. No one knows what's there because it's not been excavated a great lot. But it's certainly incredibly historical and very rich, spanning since the 16th, probably the 15th century, when the dunes began encroaching onto Porthcawl. So I thought to myself that there's a part of it which is you can explore it as it is, but there's also this mysterious space that's beneath your feet, which for an artist and a poet is very rich sucker, and it's you can look at that, interpret that how you like. And one of the examples is that since working with Robert on this project, we've been toing and froing. Robert's been sending me poems. I've been putting, appropriating maybe images which I've done for it. And it's gone as far as very recently to Assyria. I went to an he told me he'd just been to London British Museum to see an exhibition on Assyria and Babylon, where he spent some time. And he put this poem to me called The Cave Lines, and it was about the idea of these archaeological findings in Babylon, which were a long while that were discovered. And he said, imagining this idea of these lions beneath the dunes. And I thought to myself that there's nothing, what this is doing is taking you beyond the local, it's bringing you into an area of your imagination. And I thought to myself, this place is perfect for that, because you can go on forever and your imagination could run riot. So this is an ongoing project. It's something I imagine has got a huge lot more breath left in it. And the current incarnation of these several volumes we have here, but it's just starting, taking fruition. And tonight is the first thing we've done to market. But it is the most splendid and the most fascinating place in South Wales, I think. And I think my uncle would agree with it. He had a similar experience to me when his father took him around the dunes, and we only exchanged this note in the past week. And it's funny how a place like that, where of course more famous situations like Lawrence of Arabia was shot, and where he lost the sabre, and the sabre is somewhere in the dunes still. There are some sort of very interesting things there to be looked at and discovered. Not a lot of literature, very scant amount of literature about it. I challenge you all to have a look around, scour the internet, find books on it. I mean, there's virtually nothing that really. There's not even a map of the area. I mean, can anyone find me a map that you look at? I mean, there's nothing certainly in print identifying these mounds and the names which Robert's talking about, the names which he's familiar with because he's been living around it, and he's almost folkloric in that sense. So it's rich, and I think there's a lot more to it. But here are some more poems. I think Robert was very finely put in words.
Well, don't worry, I'm not going to read all the poems in the dunes, but the dunes begins, you might say, in Newton. And Mawr and I have an allotment right at St. John's Church, and we've had that for about 8 years. And we have it because it's easy sand, easy earth to dig. If it was heavy soil, we would have abandoned it, but because the tilth is very sandy, we love it and we keep it running. That allotment is a marvellous place to grow sunflowers. And this is a winter poem. It's called Golden Plover. George Orwell wrote, vilely cold, and there was frost on my car. But by afternoon I was piling turf and scrubbing hands in a rain butt. Now, in the quartz of Pink Bay, I discover a plover, not yet in its gold corselet, but single, stunned, and considering its own death. Those matches I borrowed didn't strike on limestone, so I begged that his Dunhill from M, one allotment up. Soon the express had caught, and my tinder teased from sunflower dust and tips of raspberry canes had taken. Yes, I've been burning the ghosts of the sunflowers, blackened as old bones, they. The root balls of the sunnies fist-sized. Another season soon follows the sunflowers, and I carried Emling's canes with an armful of sticks and rearranged the glossy charcoal the wood had become, twice burning my hand. And when I walked away, there were sparks at my toe, and I asked M to guard the fire, although I knew it was out. And tonight I'm back with George Orwell in 1984, remembering the party held that stars are fragments of fire a few kilometers distant. And perhaps I might have believed it and posted something on Facebook, as now I'm blaming melt in the Arctic or this evening ironclad. And I'm going to borrow one of the Dunes books. A taller plant than sunflowers, and I think Newton sunflowers are important for their glory, but they're not the tallest plant in that area. Hemlock can be taller, and if you go into the dunes, you might discover hemlock. You have to know what hemlock looks like. It might be in your best interest to know that. Hemlock. A hollow horn bending in the rain. Soon its stem will rattle and darkness fall. But for now, as tall as I, this horse poisoner, surely Socrates knew what was in the bowl. He sipped in scorn, proud and disbelieving. The spotted viper is no kinder. You will also find spotted vipers in those dunes. As on the beach itself, called Trithoraban, the dunes go down to the beach, and there are lots of interesting plants there. This is called saltwort. Caustic in the sand, where we build our fire, and I sleep rolled in a blanket beside it. A brand that shifts in the beach breeze, its shadow under Alpharats, my mother's star, tonight blue as driftwood ash, and I feel its roots in the bedrock, the limestone that allows. This is the poem that Dan mentioned, Cave Lion. Now, next year I publish a novel about caving in this area, because there is a dune there called Pulswill, and there's also the word Shwill for the water source that is found at Ogmore, and that lies under those same dunes. And Shwill, water source, is also known as the Great Spring of Glamorgan, and it's the biggest spring, the biggest freshwater spring in Wales, and we should all be proud that it's there. And if you don't know it's there, you should go out and find it, because it's extraordinary. And there's an entrance to it. It's viewable with permission from Drwy Cymru Welsh Water in the pumping station between Iwerny and Ogham by Sea. Not very long ago, Shwill was a backup water source for Bridgend. I think that's been changed now, because it might have been polluted by nitrites and things like that. But we should all be aware of the extraordinary, I mean really extraordinary cave system that is found under those dunes, and the only access to Shwill is at that pumping station. And the novel will be published in about a year's time. It might be called Delirium, and it might be called Nia, N-I-A. I'm not sure yet. Cave lions. This imagines lions in the caves. There were cave lions. 5,000 to 10,000 years ago, cave lions existed. Around here, maybe. Who can deny what the mind might see? In caves under the dunes, the lions lay, somehow discovering one another, but always the rarest of species. Their bones vanished or not yet disinterred, because lion DNA still awaits verification in Tom Britain's country. Yet it's only a matter of time. Miles long, these caves once entered. Yes, there are squeezes, rifts, and sometimes passages blocked by fallen sand and all the zigzaggery of limestone geology itself, intricate as a honeycomb. But the line of my acquaintance was singular, abandoned by Babylonians, fled from Saddam in his palace on the hill, and a city not yet visited by American tank drivers who would press up Procession Street, bulls and griffins on temple walls, astonishing the GIs, such art to delay or diminish demons. But the Lion of Babylon has a ferocious basalt grin. I saw it crouching in the weeds, a dead palm frond upon its pedestal. And I urged Nazar, our cameraman, to risk his life and film the beast, because like cockroaches, spies were everywhere. Friends, we are not unlike the slave that lion devours, an Assyrian snatched in the grass, sacrificial child by death defiled. Saddam, of course, designed a tank called the Lion of Babylon, but night blind, squat, it never fired a shot. That's a peculiar poem. It's like two poems squashed together, one about the dunes and one about Babylon. Also, it's a bit of a political poem in that it talks about Saddam Hussein and what he, or the tyranny that he brought to Iraq. But because my visits to Iraq 15 years ago was so crucial to me, I find its influence worming its way into even poems about the dunes of my home area. And I'm only going to read one more poem. This, by the way, is a beautiful looking book. Maybe not for the poems, but for the drawings and for the marvellous paper that Dan has designed and put together, and the cover is fantastic. What a Christmas present it might make. But Mark is doing it, so I thought I'd do it as well. This is an attempt at humour, and it's the last poem I'll read now. It's Lawrence of Arabia. It mentions Peter O'Toole. Actually, it's inaccurate because Peter O'Toole didn't come to these dunes. It was the other famous actor whose name was that Egyptian.
Omar Sharif.
Omar Sharif was there. That's right.
Gorgeous, wasn't he?
But this is called Lawrence of Arabia. How are you, Mr. O'Toole? I said. Epic, he replied. But tell me, where can a man find a drink in this desert? He was wearing a scarlet bisht and holding a bone-handled shafra, gazing down from the toe, neat as a goshawk on the imperial wrist. I looked around. Sand to the horizon, and the wayfarer's tree, splendid as an honour guard. 2 miles, I said, to the ancient Britain. 2 miles to the pelican in her piety. And then he came down sideways down that golden escalator and heading east, maybe looking askance at my irrepressible native insouciance. Diolch yn fawr, thank you.